So welcome to my YouTube channel. That's what we call The Good Life. It's February and I'm going to be showing you some of the things you could be planting in the month of February, and indeed some of the things that I'm going to be planting and you can plant too. Now if you've not already subscribed to my channel, if you could please do so, because you'll get lots of helpful hints and tips all throughout the year from my home garden, my allotment, and from time to time my home kitchen. Now let's get started with the things that we can be planting. So I've got my planter here that I plant everything up in. It's really useful. So just to give you a little bit of a heads up, I always do 50-50 multi-purpose. So this is just normal communal gardenal multi-purpose, and then 50% core. So, and that's it in there. So you buy core in blocks and you mix it with water, and I mix the two together. The reason I do that is that it's a really good medium for germinating seeds in, and it means I don't have to buy seed compost, and it just makes life an awful lot easier. It also means a bag of compost goes a lot further, and the blocks of core, you just, you know, put some water with it and it expands, you know, a bit like you used to do when you were a child, when you used to do the sunflowers, and it really helps with drainage and all that sort of thing. You can mix a little bit of perlite in with it if you want to, but generally I just do about 50-50 multi-purpose with core, and then I just mix it together to start to get sowing, like so. So there we go. So that's my compost ready, and I've got lots of pots out, and you're probably wondering what I'm going to be sowing. So let's move swiftly on to that. Now, one of the things I would definitely be sowing this month, if you've not already done it and you want to grow it, are things like aubergines, sweet peppers and chilli peppers. And the reason we do them so early on is because they do take quite a while for them to turn into fruit. If you start them too late, the winter will come and you won't get any fruit. I've already started mine off, and mine are on my kitchen near my window, staying warm because it's far too cold to have them out here at the moment, and I've not got a heated greenhouse. So these are something that you would definitely, if you want your chilies and your sweet peppers and your aubergines, definitely worth getting them in this month. If you start leaving it till March, you are pushing it a little bit, so definitely would recommend getting those in. If you wanted to put some peas and some broad beans in, you can completely do that, but you just must make sure that the ones that can take the slightly harsher temperatures. I've already got some broad beans up on my allotment, and I want to put some more in, but I don't really want to go to the faff of buying the ones which are a little bit more expensive, so I'm actually going to put another lot in next month and get some other broad beans that aren't quite so temperamental with the weather. And again, the same with the peas. If you put some peas in this month, it's perfectly okay to do that, but you do need some that are better for colder temperatures, so you just need to check the dates on the packet. Something like early onward would work. So again, I'm going to wait until next month because I've got loads of peas, but none of them are good to put in this month, so I'm not going to pop any more peas in until next month. One thing I will mention is a lot of people keep asking me a good book. This is absolutely fantastic. Allotment Month by Month. It's absolutely a fabulous book. It's so explanatory and easy to understand, and it's not very expensive either. If you'd like to purchase one because you've not got one already, there is a link up on the screen and there is one in the description, because we do have an allotment shop. I have to tell you, we do make a little bit of money out of it if you do make any purchases, but Amazon are pretty reasonable anyway, so I would recommend getting this book. I've got it and it's absolutely fantastic. It's a little bit like my allotment Bible, so definitely recommend that one. So something I'm going to definitely be planting this month, and I will add actually, do pace yourself at this time of the year. It's very tempting to plant lots and lots of things. So the reason I start early is because it means that I can spread what I need to plant over the course of the year. And the things I start off now are generally because they benefit from starting off a little bit earlier. There are lots and lots of things I could be starting off now. Apart from the fact I'd have struggled to look after them, it means that if I start the things off more that I have to now, I can then stagger what are the other things during the course of the year to make life a lot easier for me. So I would probably recommend in February only starting off about 4 or 5 things, so you can really manage it, because the last thing you want to do is to start things off and then to lose them because you've done too many. I've done exactly the same. I've done too many things from time to time, and I've learnt from my mistakes, and I'm hoping that you can learn from my mistakes so you don't make quite so many. One thing I do love starting off are my tomatoes in February. Now, I don't start all my tomatoes off in February, but I will start off maybe 1 or 2 varieties. Again, you know, you've got quite a long planting window. I mean, this one says January to April, so there's no rush to start all of your tomatoes off this month, but I've got such a range here. I won't be starting all these off this year. I seem to accumulate tomatoes seeds. I don't know where they all come from, but I've got a selection of Alicante, which I've grown before, which is absolutely lovely. One of my firm favourites I always grow every year, which is Roma. It's a large plum tomato. I completely adore it. It makes the best tomato sauce, and they're absolutely delicious in virtually any dish that you do. Absolutely love those. Grew Tigerello for the first time last year, and as you can see, it's got a slightly patterned flesh to it. Again, utterly gorgeous. Similar to the Roma, but still Roma is my firm favourite. Good old-fashioned cherry tomato. So obviously I'll probably start some of those off at some point. And Elisa Craig, I probably pronounced that very badly indeed. Sun Gold is very good, but I haven't got any of those this year, but I did pick something up called Honeycomb, which I've never grown before, but if they taste as yummy as they sound, they will be absolutely fabulous, so I will definitely be starting some of those off this year. Oh, and I've got some more Roma, so I must have picked them up, not realising I had the other ones. By far too many seeds. So let's get planting some tomatoes. Now, when I do my tomatoes, I normally just start them off. All depends how many you want, but I do share with friends or family, so I do generally start off more than I need. So obviously I've got my mix of compost and core here. So again, getting one of these is really handy, I can tell you. It didn't cost me that much, and I've had it absolutely years. So one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they don't fill it up enough. I fill it with these little trays, I fill it right up to the top, and then I gently pat it down, and then I slide it off like that. And if you've missed a bit, and just pat it down like that. Now, something that's really worth doing, and I'll take my gloves off for this, is when you sow your seeds, and generally with an awful lot of stuff, don't just chuck them all in there, because otherwise they'll get tangled and then there'll be a real faff when you want to transplant them. So I've decided to go for the honeycomb first. Now, what I will say is with some of these really fancy varieties, you sometimes don't get many seeds in the packet. It's not actually a bad thing quite often, because you'll find that some of these really nice ones, they do generally all germinate. So when you open a packet and you think, oh my goodness, how many seeds? They do genuinely germinate very well. So these ones are easy not to jumble up, but they are definitely well worth putting about, I don't know, it's probably about, it's not as much as an inch, but it's about a good ½ an inch apart. As you drop them in. I know it's a little bit more fiddly, but I promise you it's worth it when you do something like this. Some things you can throw things in clumps and they're okay, and you'll watch me doing it on my allotment from time to time, but things like this, it's definitely worth that little bit of extra effort. So I'm just popping them in. I might even put some more on the other side, but I'll have to make sure I label this really well. So there we go. One, and that's, they said there were 12 in the packet. I didn't count them, but they're all there. Now, you've got a couple of options here. You can either sprinkle a little bit of compost over them, but a very thin layer, or something that I use, which I'm going to have to get some more of, is Vermiculite. The reason you use Vermiculite is because it lets a little bit more light in, so it's easier for the seeds to grow through, and in my opinion, it's worth the investment. I normally buy a big bag off Amazon, and it lasts you years and years. I decant it into a little tub and then just keep filling it up. Again, I'll put a link in the description if you wanted to get some of this Vermiculite, but it's well worth it. And you just gently sprinkle it over, just to gently cover them up, like so. And I will talk about aftercare of how to look after these seeds once we've sown them all, because I'm obviously not going to leave them here in the greenhouse because it's nowhere near warm enough. And normally just gently pat it off a little bit with my hands. If I'd accidentally put too much on, I could just use the block again just to scrape it off, but I genuinely just try and pat on what I need. I'm now going to mark this up, because obviously if we don't mark it up, we know what happens. We think we'll remember what we planted and we jolly well won't. So what I would say is, if you're going to do like me, I'm going to put the honeycomb in one side, and I'm going to put something else here, probably the Roma in a minute. Just put something in front of it so you know their back is one and then their back is something else. So, tomato. But yes, if one thing you learn from me today is to label things, because the amount of times on some of the Facebook groups I see that pictures of, do you know what I've planted, because they've not marked them up. It's so easy to do. I've done it myself, but do label them up. So I'm now going to pop something else in there as well. So like I said, I think I'm going to go for, just make sure there's no, yeah, and when they're expensive, do pull the packet right out in case there's one hiding, but there isn't. When you pay that kind of money just for like 12 seeds, you want to make sure you use them really, don't you? So I'm going to pop Roma in the other half, because like I said, this is probably, if I could only grow one tomato, this would probably be the one for me. Might be a different one for you, and actually it'd be really nice to hear from you what tomato varieties are your favourite tomato varieties, because we're all different at the end of the day. But Roma is definitely my favourite by far. Absolutely adore it. So there's a whole host of brassicas you can start off in February. Anything from cauliflowers to broccoli to cabbage to kale. And actually traditionally I normally start off kale, but I thought, do you know what, I'm going to do something a little bit different this year, and I'm going to start off with some Brussels instead. Now Brussels are one of those things that definitely benefit from being started off early. Kale is fantastic, but you can probably start that in however many courses of months, and that would still provide kale, whereas Brussels, you're obviously trying to create Brussels, and they're a little bit like peppers, and they take a little bit longer, albeit far more hardy. Now this pack, I just went into one of those little cheapy shops and I've got a pack of 8, and nearly all those things in there, with the exception of the courgettes, could be planted this month if I wanted to. That being said, I probably personally wouldn't, but the Brussels and the cabbage and the purple broccoli could easily be started. Oh, and the onions this month as well. So let's go on to the Brussels. Let's find the pack in here. It doesn't look like many seeds in the pack, but when I had a rough count up of how many seeds were in each pack, they were actually quite generous. So they're more generous than you think. So Brussels sprouts, there's far more seeds in there than I would need. I mean, you only need about a dozen plants. I don't know how many are in there, but there's way more than I would need in a year. So these little multi-packs and some of these little cheaper shops are actually really good value. I've bought seeds from all sorts of different companies in the past, and unless you want a very, very special variety of seed, some of these cheaper varieties work just as well, quite honestly. Something like Roma, you wouldn't find that in the pound shop, but a normal basic tomato you would. So a normal basic, but lots of things you could. So it's worth looking in there. And actually, I was struggling to find some seeds because it's quite early on in the year, and I found quite a good selection of things in one of our local cheap shops. So yeah, they are worth looking around. Plus the fact you save yourself quite a few pennies, because I think one of the things us gardeners generally, we like to do things on a budget. I know I definitely do. A real sense of achievement if you can grow something that's only cost you a few pence and provided for you, your family and your friends, like a lot of my plants do. These I'll probably end up having more than I need, and I'll end up sharing these plants with friends and fellow allotment holders and that sort of thing. It's the same kind of thing as I did before. You mound it up and then you get the block, you pat it down so it's got quite a good amount of compost in it, and then just scrape the top off. You could scrape it off with other things, I suppose, but a piece of wood works really, really well for me. And a very, very similar thing to the tomatoes, spread them out, don't clump them in, because otherwise you'll have exactly the same problem as what you had with the tomato. I mean, obviously you can thin them out and waste them, but far better to spread them out and maybe have enough seeds for another year, I think. So that's my Brussels in. I've done them a little bit thicker than the tomatoes, but not much different. And again, just cover it with just like my last bit of vermiculite. I'm going to have to order some more of that. That should just about be enough. But like I said, you can always use compost. You don't have to use this. In fact, I might have to sprinkle a little bit over the compost just in the bits that I've got a bit of a gap. So that works really well. And like with all the others, even if you're only starting off one lot of brassica, still put a label in it because you might struggle to remember. So again, very, very thinly, really not much at all. Because the smaller the seed, the less it needs to be covered as a general rule of thumb. So let's pop a label in that, and that's the Brussels done. And let's move on to the final thing I'm going to be sowing today. What I will say is I will be putting those into a propagator. I've got a heated propagator that's indoors, because like I said, this isn't heated. If you've not got one already, it's been a complete game changer for me, so I really recommend that you get one. I'll put a link up on the screen for one that I recommend, and also one in the description, but of course you can just go to a garden centre or something. So that's that. The other thing I'm going to be showing you are leeks, well, alliums basically. So can be started off this month. Leeks, you've got onion sets, and you've also got onion seeds. Now traditionally I always start my leeks off in February. I've often waited with my onions until March, which you can do as well, and I've never started onions off from seed. But in this little pack, and also I was watching another YouTuber, I've got to admit it, he started his off from seed, and I just wanted to see what the difference was. So fortunately my little 99p pack here has got me some onions in it as well. Now these onion sets, I've only ever used these before. Now you can either poke these straight into the ground this month, next month, or the month after, or you can start them off in a tray like this, and then you just poke them into the soil. And traditionally I've never done it this way. I always poke them straight in the ground. So this year I'm going to give, again I've got this from the pound shop, that's I'm really chuffed with that. I'm going to fill this with compost, and I'm just going to poke the onions into the soil, and you poke them just below the surface, not too far down, because you're just trying to get them to root in. I think the reason people do them in module trays like this is if your soil's a little bit claggy, plus the fact sometimes the birds try to attack them, and the slugs and snails do. So if you pop them in these, it kind of just gives them a little bit of a head start to get a little bit stronger before you actually pop them out into the ground. So I'm going to get those going. And I'm also going to do my leeks and my onions. And again, with my leeks, I've generally always done them in quite a big tub. I think I've put them too close together. And I've just been researching it a little bit. So rather than doing them in one great big tub and then separating them all, which is really easy to do, but I think it's hampered the growth a little bit, I'm going to put them in slightly smaller pots and spreading them a little bit thinner as well, just to see whether that helps. Because again, I will start my leeks off and my onions off, and then I will pop them outside in a month or two or so's time to completely come on. So let's get planting these leeks and onions, and I will show you what I mean. So right, I wouldn't use a shallow pot for that because it's just a little bit too shallow. I would use for the seeds a slightly deeper pot, some more ones like this, because they do root quite a bit. And they're going to possibly be in there a lot longer than those other things that will get transplanted quite quickly. So again, I wouldn't necessarily fill it up to the top, because the reason I don't fill these right up to the top is purely for the fact that it gives the onions a little bit of support when they're growing. So traditionally I always just do it a little bit like that. I don't know what anyone else does. So, and what I'm going to do with these seeds is I'll show you how I'm going to sprinkle them. So they will be closer than when I did the other things like the tomatoes and the Brussels, but they will still be spread out a little bit. Now you have two choices when you do onions like this. You can either separate them all out and space them out quite equally, you know, like ½ a foot apart when you plant them in the garden, or some people actually grow them in little clumps. So the little clump that they put in here, they lift the whole clump out and they put the whole clump in the garden. I think it does all depend how big you want your onions to be. Some other research I've been doing is when you buy onion sets, you can only buy certain types of onion sets. There aren't a wide variety, and if you want to grow a larger onion, seeds are the way to go, basically. Mine aren't anything fancy, they are just labelled onion, so I don't actually have any idea what variety they are, but I might try and source some other onions to try some different varieties, just to see the difference in the two. Sometimes it's just nice to compare, isn't it? I think I seem to have a stray seed from something else in there, look. I guess that's what happens when you go to the pound shop. Having said that, I know people that have bought packets of seeds from expensive companies and had completely the wrong seeds in their pots, so I think it can happen in any environment. So not really clumped together, like I won't just drop them all together, I will just gently sprinkle a few just in there, and I will just cover it with just a very, very thin layer of compost. So the onions are done and the leeks are done. The leeks are done exactly the same way as the onions are in the pots. I've got them up there. And now to move on to the onions. So these are the onion sets. Like I said, normally I just poke them straight into the ground, which you can completely do, but I just thought I'd try it this way this year to see whether I get a better crop. So I filled it with compost, and all you do is you just push them in. You know, there's nothing too scary about it at all, because all you're trying to do is just get them to root in to get them started. So when you put them in the ground, you do put them like just below the soil like that. When they're in pots like this, they don't have to go down quite so deep when they're in the pots, because you're just trying to get them to root. So as long as you push them down most of the way, then that's fine, like so. So I've got two, I've got Red Baron and Stir On, which are ones which I've grown I don't know how many times. Centurion is another one that I've grown. And like I said, when you buy sets, you do seem very, very limited to what you can grow. Now obviously these do not need to go in a propagator. I will leave these in fact they'd probably be alright if I just left them outside, but I've got a greenhouse and I don't want the birds nipping them out. These will just stay in here. I will water them and they will just start off in here. All the other things that I've started off, that I've sown, I will be putting into my propagator just to give them a little bit of a boost, because they won't germinate, or they're unlikely to germinate if I don't put them in a propagator, because it does just make a big difference. As soon as they've germinated, and I mean as soon as they've germinated, I'll take them out and I'll put them close to a window so they get plenty of light. Now I do hope you've enjoyed watching this channel. I know some of you have got chickens or you would like chickens. I do have some videos on that, and the link will be up on the screen if you'd like to watch one of our chicken videos.